I don't need this. My 10-year-old son immediately threw the gift he received from his mother-in-law into the trash. Apologized to Grandma. The mother-in-law looked like a demon, but her son shook his head with his mouth tied into a single letter. Then he picked up 2 bags of presents from the trash can and stuck them out to me. Is this still it? When I checked the bags handed to me, one of them was a $1 bill for my son. The other one was to be given to a certain person. And when I saw the contents, I felt a chill down my spine. My name is Olivia Cooper, and I am a 33-year-old housewife. For the past 3 years, I have often helped my parents-in-law, who run a large construction-related company, and every day my mother-in-law teaches me manners and how to deal with business partners. My parents were an ordinary office worker, so when I first got married, I had a hard time keeping a single book, but I did my best to help as much as possible. My husband's name is Christopher, and we are the same age. Even though my parents' family is a large company, I work for another company without using my family connections, saying, my 2 older brothers run the family company, and I, the 3rd son, have a good career. I have nothing but respect for my husband's way of life, which carves out his own life. Alexander was born in his blood. My 10-year-old son hates that he looks exactly like his husband and is crooked. And she is a kind child who helps me when I am busy, saying, I can't make my mom alone struggle. The year-end and New Year holidays are the busiest time of the year. This is because a party attended by local influential people is held in the large hall of a famous hotel, and the mother-in-law presides over. My father-in-law has already passed away, but even after my eldest son and second son took over the business, my family's construction company had a great influence. That's why my mother-in-law is the representative of a local company and is preparing for the party. Olivia, give me the full names of these people. At the end of the year, when I was at my parents-in-law's house arranging a party, my mother-in-law showed me 10 photos of her face and came up to me with a scary face. These people are certainly customers of the company. As I remembered each person's name, my mother-in-law sighed and said, "It's late," without waiting for 2 seconds. "You still can't remember. You really can't use it." My mother-in-law looks at me condescendingly. "If that's the case, I can't pay you for helping the company. Work like a cart horse, and you'll remember a little better." My mother-in-law walked out in frustration, deliberately stepping on my foot and going somewhere. In fact, I have been helping my mother-in-law's company for several years, but I have never received an allowance. My wife was also very snoring, and I was always bombarded with words that denied my efforts and personality. In addition, when I had a visitor at the company, I was laughed at for making up a mistake that I had not made, saying, "I'm embarrassed to be a sloppy wife." Also, I often curse my family, saying, "The parents of poor office workers didn't discipline me." My husband and brother-in-law, who I couldn't see, warned me many times, but where does my mother-in-law blow? Because of this condition, the eldest son and his wife divorced 5 years ago, the second son and his wife followed suit, and the daughter-in-law left the mother-in-law. That's why I've been helping her alone for 3 years. Many times I wanted to run away, but I persevered because I gave birth to and raised my beloved Christopher. I spent the end of the year with slapstick like that, and on the day of the party. Under my mother-in-law's policy that New Year's greetings should be given by the whole family, my husband, who was not involved in the management of the company, and my son, who was still in elementary school, were also called every time. There's a member of Parliament here today, but what are you wearing, Mr. Olivia? It's a dress for the new year, isn't it? My mother-in-law saw me in a formal suit and couldn't believe it. I made a face. But that's because my mother-in-law once told me, dresses are 100 years early. Because I was told. But if I say it back here, it will ruin the festive mood. I gritted my teeth. My husband and brother-in-law called out to me, "I'm sorry all the time, I'll always take care of my mother," and started to greet her. Alexander and I, who were left behind, did the drinking and miscellaneous tasks, but my son was only 10 years old. An adult New Year's party is not supposed to be fun, but they are cheerfully helping out. Oh, Uncle of the City Council, Happy New Year. While I was drinking, my son took it upon himself to greet the people around him for the new year. He smiled and bowed politely, so he became a popular person. I even got business cards from all over the place, and it was as if Alexander was the president. "How are you, shaved head? What grade?" A lot of people were talking to me. What were you talking about? When my son showed interest in the topic of adults, the man next to him said, "Talk about the bullet train." I replied. Other people were also saying, "If I can get this project, it will be profitable." Just then, a man in a crisp suit appeared dashing into the venue. That person is... It's Mr. Parker, a member of Parliament. You can't go wrong because I memorized the faces and names of more than 100 attendees all night. He was so brazen that he didn't look like he was 65 years old, and he immediately went to his mother-in-law and chatted with the people at the venue. Soon, I started going around saying hello to them. The mother-in-law was dissatisfied that she couldn't talk to Mr. Parker slowly, so she was in a bad mood and suddenly called her son in a harsh tone. "Alexander, I'll give you a present." Perhaps because it was about money, she took her son to a secluded part of the venue. However, after a while, "I don't need this." I heard my son's loud voice, so I turned to see him throwing the gift I got from my mother-in-law into the trash. The mother-in-law looks like an Azura. I immediately ran up to Alexander and scolded her, apologized to Grandma. But he shook his head, ran to pick up the present from the trash can, and thrust the bag at me. Is this still it? 2 presents in my son's hands. Why not 2? Confused, when I opened the side with Alexander's name written on it, only $1 bill came out. For some reason, the other bag had, "To Mr. Parker," written on it. Ha! Why is it addressed to the teacher? Wondering, I checked the contents of the bag and found a check for $3 million. Wait a minute. What's this? As I made my eyes as big as a plate, my mother-in-law snatched the check from my hand at the speed of light. Then, after looking around in a panic, he cursed his son, saying, "You look like your mother and are useless," and walked away as if to run away. I was surprised, but I walked out of the venue with my son in tears. In the corner of the hallway, I asked, "What happened?" and Alexander spoke quietly. 3 years ago, when I started helping out on my own, my grandma told me to give gifts to the MP's uncle who came to the party. According to Alexander, at first, he didn't understand why, and his son gave him a bag. However, my son, who was suspicious of his mother-in-law grinning and watching the moment he handed over the gift, secretly looked at the contents before handing over the bag last year. There was a piece of paper that I had never seen written as a check inside, so I looked it up on the internet after returning home. Then I found out that it had the same meaning as money, and I also learned that it was a sin to give such a thing to a politician. "I gave you money last year and the year before that. Do I have to leave my mom and go to jail?" My son burst into tears and said, "What should I do?" I was trembling. That's right, my mother-in-law used Alexander to give money to politicians. They probably knew that giving and receiving money would be a crime, so they used their children to keep a low profile. My son, who was still young and didn't know anything. "You're not doing anything wrong. Mom is going to beat Grandma. I can't believe I'm making Alexander suffer so much." I was filled with anger, and this time the cord of my patience was broken. I vowed to find out the truth and take revenge on my mother-in-law. On the night of the party, I immediately consulted with my husband. He was furious when he found out that his mother-in-law had ordered his child to give money to politicians for 3 years. I was scheduled to help my parents-in-law 2 days later, but my husband decided to accompany me. This is to get my husband to get the attention of his mother-in-law, and in the meantime, to look at the company's materials. I was made to help with this and that on a daily basis, so I knew where to find which documents in my hands. Thanks to my husband's ability to stop me, I was able to find what I was looking for in no time. In order to collect other evidence, I ran around everywhere, and the investigation took a month to investigate. But when I thought that this would take away the burden of my son, who was forced to bear the burden of a crime, I didn't feel any pain at all. And 1 month later, when everything was ready, my mother-in-law's birthday party was held at my parents-in-law's house. My brother-in-law, my husband, my son, and I were the same members as the party. Delicious alcohol and food are also prepared, and my mother-in-law is in a good mood. Today, it wasn't Olivia's bad food, but I got it delivered from a famous restaurant. My mother-in-law sits up and tastes wine. My mother's food is much better than the food at this restaurant. My brother-in-law and husband praised her without defending me, which was rare today. "You're flattering me because it's my birthday today." Nothing will come out of it, the mother-in-law who shows it doesn't seem to be full. My husband looked at her and said, "You're going to drink a lot today. I'm going to bring you a new bottle of wine. Alexander, come with me." As we left the room to get a glass of wine, my husband looked at me and said, "I asked for the rest," and I nodded slightly. As expected, I couldn't show my son how I was questioning my mother-in-law, so I consulted with my family in advance and made arrangements for Alexander to wait outside. The husbands disappeared across the hallway, and the door slammed shut. "Speaking of which, Olivia has a report for you, right?" As soon as the two of them were gone, my husband's brother glanced at me and opened his mouth. "Oh, I wonder if the second one could have done it. I've had enough men," so give birth to a girl to help me. She doesn't want a cute grandchild, she wants a free servant. I looked coldly at my mother-in-law, who was endlessly greedy, and raised my voice. January 1, 2024, $3 million. My mother-in-law frowns and tilts her head, but I don't care. You would have tried to give the money to Flynn Parker, a member of Congress, with a check. Oh, you mean the party. I was just trying to give my friend's business card to the teacher, and I accidentally put a check in it. I've never heard of anyone making such a mistake. I'm just stunned by the excuses that are so blatant. I also know that I didn't just give him money once. You've given money to teachers many times so that you can get a job on the construction of the bullet train, right? Hey, what are you based on? As soon as the specifics came out of my mouth, my mother-in-law began to visibly get upset. Don't be sloppy, all the evidence is here. At this point, I pulled out some books from my bag. Yes, on that day when my husband accompanied me and I went to help my parents-in-law's house, I was looking for a document that showed the flow of money in the company. As I expected, there was a ledger on the bookshelf, but what surprised me was that I even found a back ledger. And there was a history of black money written there. What do you know about Shiroto's habit? Just on the day that the congressman came to greet and give a speech, a lot of money was coming out of the company. Hiding this money, you made a false report to the tax office. I didn't know that I was researching so much, and my surprised mother-in-law was at a loss for words. And it seems that the other supporters were also suspicious that your mother-in-law and Mr. Parker were connected by money, right? What? That's because I've heard it directly from you. In this survey, the business cards that my son received at a party were very useful. Relying on that, I went to the homes of supporters one by one. Some of them remembered that their mother-in-law inadvertently slipped her mouth and told her about the back money. However, my parents-in-law's company had a lot of influence in the local area, so no one could talk about it. But when I told them that I had the evidence in the form of the back ledgers, they said they would testify if necessary. Wait a minute, that's bad. My mother-in-law's face turned pale and white, and cold sweat began to flow from her forehead. However, we were not going to let up on the offensive here. It looks like you had a good time, not just Mr. Parker. I took out my phone and played the video I was recording. What was pictured there was a pile of brand bags and jewelry hidden in the back of her mother-in-law's wardrobe. When I was checking the back ledger, I found out that my mother-in-law had also made an expensive purchase for herself. Oh, you're not fishing in people's rooms. Right? You think so too, don't you? The mother-in-law has put her misdeeds on the shelf and is trying hard to get her two brothers-in-law on her side. However, the brothers-in-law looked at each other and took out a receipt from under the desk. What was written there was a message that said, "I have purchased everything, and I am waiting for you to use it again." Angry that her mother-in-law was spending the company's money, her brothers-in-law sold all the expensive brand-name items she had hidden at the thrift store. Hey, what are you doing? That's the line here. You don't have to pay for it to get a job with confidence. And we're running out of patience. To tell the truth, my two brothers-in-law regretted that they couldn't stop their mother-in-law's snoring and ended up getting a divorce. Tear your wife away from us, Take money from the company, come on." Immediately after the birthday party that was flattered, the mother-in-law was attacked by her two sons, so she was in a hurry. "I'm sorry. I thought this would be good for the company." My mother-in-law apologized profusely, but I couldn't forgive her. "Don't mess around." The brothers-in-law glared at their mother-in-law. "I've been trying. See? Olivia, you know the same woman, don't you? Help me reconcile with my sons." My mother-in-law leaned up to me and said that she could still help. "I'll never see you again, so that's it." I loudly declared my goodbye and stood up, and my brothers-in-law followed. "And just be honest with the police, and I'll be glad to see you." We left the place, muttering, "Such a..." and ignoring my mother-in-law, who collapsed on the spot. Later, he was interrogated by the police, and at the trial, both his mother-in-law and Mr. Parker, a member of Parliament, were found guilty. My mother-in-law was not allowed to go inside the fence, but it seems that she was no longer dealt with by any of the local residents because of the back money. He was isolated from his brothers-in-law, and now he lives in a shabby apartment and works from morning to night at an unfamiliar part-time job to earn money. On the other hand, I am working as a full-time employee at my brother-in-law's company and studying hard to become an accountant. Christopher is also supportive of housework and childcare, and I live a busy but fulfilling life.